it's fantastic that you have joined me, and I know you as Gaia, which is a beautiful name. I know that you were born in Peru, and you grew up with many medicine men and women. Now, on your bio, it says that you're a channeler, a grief and end-of-life doula, and a spiritual teacher. Wow, how beautiful. So, Gaia, tell me a little bit about you. Tell me a bit about your journey.
Well, first, thank you so very much for having me. I feel so very honored to join you and to support your intention. The intention of the podcast was beautiful and resonated with my heart. As you said, my journey really begun in the space of sorrow and challenge. I felt a call to look for spirituality in general, to look for wisdom, to seek the answers so that I can support myself through my suffering. That's how it all came about. And yoga was there. I stepped on a yoga mat and I felt that it was the worst time of my life. And for the very first time, I felt, period. I felt and I realized it was just so numb. And I have forgotten the ways that I witnessed as I was younger, growing up in a tiny beach town in Peru. I have forgotten the ways. And I got caught up in the society and the going and the rat race. And I always felt like there must be a different way. There has to be a different way. There has to be something else. Like this cannot just be it. This cannot just be it. So yeah, yoga was like a doorway to an exploration of spirituality, meaning a connection with that vibrational energy that we all are, really coming in contact with the spirit and the soul and begin to see life from that perspective. And it was a beautiful journey of exploration. I feel the yoga tradition gave me permission to be curious and just go out and see and this space of wonder. And as my life continue and the ebbs and flows of life, I discover different wisdom traditions. Some, like I became a shamanic practitioner, it just runs in my being because that's my lineage from Peru. And then some were like just the need to understand. Like I became an end of life and grief doula, and I took courses in the University of Vermont to really understand our Western mind. And so it was just this curiosity to pull me in different directions. And it was not one thing that I was seeking, but to really understand spirituality from different perspectives, as I said. So that they became tools for me to be able to come to the clarity that the purpose of my life is to support people when they are during challenges. And it's not just to overcome them, but it was my experience that through the challenges of life, there is infinite possibilities of really waking up to who we are. It is through the challenges of life that we are invited to dig deep and connect to what is sacred, to what is real. So you can have fulfilled lives. I know that for so many people, it's like, oh, that's kind of morbid, like the challenge, the grief, the end of life. But they give me life. Like just really seeing the difficulties is what allows me to see the beauty and the life. So yeah, in a way, that's kind of the journey.
Sounds like you've really been through it, and it sounds from an outside perspective that the challenge is, kind of delving into the challenge, as you say, it's not getting over it, but going through it is what forms the person. It's what gives us the strength and the tools to actually look inwardly.
Definitely, yes. For a long time, it was all about overcoming. I wore them as patches of honor, like I went through that and I went through that, and kind of like I was in the survival mode of being a victim of what happened. And as I dive deeper into spiritual practice, I realized, oh no, this was just a doorway to it, right? One point, it serves us well, be the survivors of what happened, so then we can understand it with our full humanity, right? We're fully human, but we're also fully divine. And so there is a time when we are invited to transcend that and even be grateful for what happened, and without condoning choices and condoning situations and actions but we can actually see them from a different perspective. And so that is the invitation for myself every single day, and the invitation to the ones that feel aligned for me to support them.
So may I ask, when it came to your shamanic practice, can you explain to the listeners and the viewers what is a shamanic practice? What is that? Sort of, you and I are in a world that this is quite a normal language, but if somebody who has never heard of it, how can they utilize it, and how can they be supported by a shamanic practice? And then we'll go on to delve into a little bit more about the grief and death doulaing in a minute.
Of course, I feel that the best way to describe a shaman, it is somebody that understands and that walks in both worlds here on the earth plane, like somebody that really embody the being human on the earth and being a caretaker, a wisdom keeper that understands the importance of choosing to be here, but is fully aware and fully in contact and fully understands and walks from the energy field and walks from his divinity. So somebody that understands both. Now, I love it when my shaman in the Andes of Peru calls my yoga teacher in the Himalayas your shaman. And when my yoga teacher in the Himalayas, calls like, oh, your guru, your teacher from the Andes. And it took me a minute. At the beginning, I felt like I was cheating on both, because I was like going and receiving wisdom from one, receiving wisdom from the other one. But it wasn't until I really got to the root, understand that they were actually teaching the same. There are shamans all around the world. The shaman means is somebody that has come in contact with the truth, and that their life are the message. Their life is really an expression, this unity within us. And I found it in both. Now, I am a shamanic practitioner from the Andes of Peru because I spent time there. It's my homeland, and I returned after leaving my homeland. Right, I felt called to go back, and it was very supported to embrace the different practices of coming in contact, like I said, with the earth, and then understanding and fully the essence of my being, and simple practices that were very tangible and real and effective. And I wanted to embody them for myself. And so then it came the opportunity to share them, right? Because when you want to learn something, you must teach it to really understand it. And that's how it came to be for me to be a practitioner. But I hope that the terms don't turn us off, and instead it's an invitation to say, oh yeah, it is just a different way to embrace this wisdom, ancient traditions. There was a way in which we as humans used to live in communion and in understanding with nature. We remember that we were nature, that we were not separate. And so the shamanic practitioner is somebody to understand that, and yet has taken action, meaning their practices to live it, not just to be a concept or live in dogma, but to actually live in this communion with nature, remembering your nature, knowing that you are part of nature and not separate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when it comes to the grief and end of life doula, what is that? Because I know what that is, but many different people utilize it differently and provide a different support. So for you, what does that mean? And how can somebody utilize it?
Yeah, doula is actually a Greek word that means somebody that supports transitions of life. So the most common is a birth doula. It's somebody that is there to support the transition of coming into life and everybody that is involved in that transition. And so a grief and end of life doula is somebody that supports the transition when we are about to leave our body. And it's just calling of support in the most important transitions of our lives. For many years, people ask me if I was a doula. I guess everything has happened like that. When I started practicing yoga, like everybody would say, like, what time do you teach? And I was like, I'm not a yoga teacher. Then I took teacher training, started teaching, and then people ask me like, what do you do Reiki? And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And so it was like invitations. And so then people asked me if I was a doula, and I was like, oh, no, that involves blood. And that is too much for me. And actually, I was in deep grief of my dad's passing and transition. And I was in India. And after a yoga class, this woman came to me. We had a beautiful connection, and she just asked me, I'm sorry, I need to ask, are you a doula? And I'm like, oh my God, so many people ask me, like, no, I'm not. I don't know why they keep asking. What nothing to do with delivering babies. And she's like, oh no, I meant enough life. And when she said that, it's just my heart started pounding. I've never heard of it. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is about 8 years ago. And he's like, I'm from New Zealand. It's a thing in New Zealand. Like, don't we need that support at that time is the most important. And I felt like I needed that support, even though I was not dying and my dad had already transitioned 2 years before that. But I was in deep grief and not understanding. And after I finished that conversation, I actually was scheduled to have a conversation with my mother. I was in Peru. I went on to open the Facebook Messenger, and it was not working. Open Facebook, and it said, University of Vermont end of life doula course. And that's how I came to be. I signed up in the moment. I was like, I really need to do this. But then after I signed up, I looked guided. So whatever guidance I came in, I understood it. But when I dived into it, I understood that was my understanding as a Western woman, and to really understand our ways in this culture. Because yes, when I'm in the Andes and when I'm in the Himalayas, there's a different understanding because there is more connection with ancient ways of living in tribe and being there to support and understanding grief. In our society, we have moved away from it. We have an addiction to happiness. We really believe if we ask people around, it's like, what do you want? Everybody wants to be happy. When we ask what that means, we have no idea what that means. In a way, it's like we want no challenge, no difficulties, and like live forever in this happily ever after, which is far from the reality of why we're here. And so it really helped me to dive and become an end of life doula, to really understand the suffering that I was going through, to grief and to death, and come in contact with my mortality, which has given me so much life. So really, that's what a doula means. I wanted to tell you my story, but a doula is somebody that really understands the death and the challenge that involves leaving the body. And like I said, not the person dying, but everybody that is impacted by it. And so then we can have support from somebody that is not emotionally involved and can have perspective to just points towards the way out. Now, because there's something wrong with it, but utilizing the process to come in contact with the reality that we all are going to die. And when we live knowing that, we actually take on life fully. Yeah. And so it was beautiful to be able to embrace death, grief, mortality from different perspectives. And that's what my intention of becoming an end of life doula and grief.
It's interesting with death. I mean, death is for me personally, it's a funny little thing. I've lost both my parents already, and when I hear my patients, my friends that lose family members or people that they love, or even pets that they love, sometimes you're left with, what do I say to that person? And it is really challenging because there is nothing that you can say or do that's going to take the pain away. However, I find that if I personally would have known of a death doula in specific moments in my life, I think it would have been really helpful for that outside perspective. For that perspective to allow you to sit with it, kind of like a birth doula, sort of walks you through and holds you and talks to you and reminds you to breathe and reminds you that actually after the storm there's going to be calm. I find it a very beautiful process of a career for certain people that can do it. because it can't be an easy career to be in.
I would have definitely not choose it as a career if I would have, sit and think about it. But to me, like I said at the beginning, it was like my own discovery of what is it that was supporting me in life. Then it was a call to share it so I can really embody it. And I feel that it's very, very important during the transition when somebody has like a diagnosis that it is like my dad had incurable cancer. There's nothing that you could done. Like that's the way it's going to be. So that the support can be there during that transition because there is life until our last breath, and then we never end because energy never gets destroyed. It only transforms. And so really to be able to have somebody that is there to hold you as you go through the emotions and through the difficulties and the challenges and you move through life in that space. But there's also a reminder to stay centered. I would have loved to have that with my dad too. And I feel when he transitioned and he had a beautiful transition, that was the moment he took his last breath. And there was just something in me that said, this is our birthright to be able to have a transition like this. And I don't know how I did it. I really felt like just so guided. My spiritual practices were there to support me, but he was the very first person that I actually that I supported in that transition. And then learning it and then understanding different ways and studying not only from a Western perspective, but also like the ancient ways of the Himalayas, the ancient ways of the Andes, transitions and understanding grief just inspire my heart because it really is a rich moment. And this both ancient traditions actually call it the holy experience. Grief is referred as the holy experience because it's one of the few experiences in our life that can completely transform us. So it could be a spiritual awakening with it. Sorry.
I find, if you are into energy lines, not everybody is, but I am. And I always find that our soul contracts are attached to our soul. And when somebody passes, the reason why it's so painful, or it can be so painful, is because those energetic lines are starting to separate from our soul. That's how I experienced it personally. I find that yes, energy is everywhere, and the transition allows us to basically transit from this human form to the energetic form. But it's the people that are left that struggle the most. It's not the transition. It's not the person that's transitioning, but the people that are left that have to hold on to those ripples, that change that happens. And the way I look at it, I don't know if it resonates, is, sort of we're all dancing to this vibration and we dance together with our friends, our family, our animals. And when one leaves, the band changes, the music changes. And when the music changes, it's not that it's bad or good, it's just that it's different. So it takes time to get a new rhythm, to get a new song. And as you say, that we don't really talk about death. We don't really connect in the Western world with that resonance and that vibration of what it is to lose somebody and how to manage it and what to do and what to expect. So may I ask, in your opinion, what can somebody do? Because there's two factors to death. Somebody can lose somebody immediately, or somebody can lose somebody through the transition of a disease. So they're able to say goodbye slowly. So as one, as a death doula, can you do both? As in, can you enter a situation where somebody's already gone? And two, what would you say to somebody who is expecting somebody to go? How can they manage that transition if they don't have the capability of getting a death doula?
Well, thank you for explaining it in song and and sound vibration. That was beautiful. I know from my experience that what makes us struggle the most in society right now is that we death as the loss, and we have forgotten the transitions in life. Every single wisdom tradition have rite of passages that begin to remind us and to teach us how to die while we're alive. And so we just go through the motions of life in our society so fast. But all wisdom tradition have actually ritual, action, mourning, conversation, support. When you go from a little girl, little boy, to an adolescent, to a young woman, young man, into motherhood, into the elder, like there's stages in which we understand that the end is not when we die, that is part of life, that we need to understand grief not as somebody has died and that's why I'm grieving and it's just an emotion. So in that, the Western traditions differ from our modern understanding of grief, that it encompasses one emotion. For them, grief is an experience that encompasses many different emotions. And the definition of grief is the suffering that we endure when we are detaching from an identity. And I'm going to say that again, is the most powerful understanding for me. Grief is the suffering, the pain that we endure when we are detaching from an identity. So if I understand myself to be a wife and I go to divorce, I am experiencing grief because I don't know who I am anymore. If I am a daughter and my father died, I knew myself to be a daughter, and that was my identity, and that gave me a sense of security, a sense of stability, a sense of like knowing who I. So when I don't have that title, when I don't have that identity, I don't know who I am. That is the real pain that we're going through. At the end of the day, it's our own movie, and we are the protagonists of our own movie. So this is about me. Your movie's about you. We want to put it that I am grieving because my mother died, and this is about my mother, but in reality it's because I don't know what to do if I am not a daughter. I don't know what to do to embrace, like, your parents are not in the body anymore. I don't know this new identity of being an orphan. I don't know this new identity of foreclosure and don't having my house. I don't know this new identity of not being single and now having to share my home, my sense of security with somebody else. I don't know that. But so the other detachments, right? And the Buddha put it beautifully, like detachment is our biggest suffering as human beings. I mean, we get attached to our favorite toothpaste and then they discontinue it and we struggle. So when we tend to it. It's our human nature. We're going to attach to everything. And so identities are harder because of that. And so I will say to somebody is going through it in the moment to just pause and take a moment. Because what the problem is that because we haven't grieved in a conscious way, all of our detachments, grief never comes alone. It's like a train, and like the cars of the train, they all come together. When one grief comes in, it brings all of them. And so a lot of times the depth of our grief is attached to the amount of grief that we haven't processed before. And so it is imperative that we embrace it with tenderness and gentleness and compassion. And unfortunately for our society, we need support. And I said unfortunately because we don't have it. And it's not that we are wrong, it just we have forgotten that we are tribal. We live in houses that we're separated, right? Some people live alone, some people it's just two people or three or four, and it takes a tribe not only to raise a child, to live life. And so it is important to know that when we're going through that, we really need somebody that is not emotionally involved in it, that doesn't know our hearts and understand that what we're going through and the choices that we're making at that moment of deep grief and pain does not define us. That we're just going through it. And because of the pain, we're probably going to make poor choices if we don't have that support. And so that best friend becomes essential in our lives. That person that maybe even like I have gone through people and said like, oh my God, my coworker of 20 years, we always talk about the weather, or, but it's the person that I share the most time. And that was actually somebody that just listened. And so we need somebody that is not going through it with us to be able to hold that space for it. And that's why I feel like a doula embodies that. I'm not going through it, but I have. Like, my story is different than yours. The details of my pain is different. But at the end of the day, I know pain inside out. So I can be there for you without wanting to fix or change you.
I love that. And I go back to the word of sound, because it's your resonance, your vibration and resonance is resonating at the same decibels as the other person that has lost somebody. We might not necessarily know the same tune, but we know there's a thread that we understand between us that allows us to share that experience in that moment. And you, as a doula, are able to ground that person so that they're not lost in the ether of that overwhelm of emotion.
Yeah, it is profound and it is deep. And people ask me this all the time. What is the worst pain? Somebody that their children die, or somebody that their parent or a sibling, or right, like the end of life as you knew it. Like, what is the worst pain? One of my teachers reminded me of this all the time. The worst pain is the one you are going through. The worst pain is the one that you are going through, because nobody can ever be in your skin. Nobody knows how much of an impact that detachment from that identity is impacting you in your life and what is bringing up for you. And when we have that understanding, then we can be compassionate to one another, which is not sympathy, but even empathy, right? Or pity. Like, it's not, oh, I feel the way you feel. And so now we're both drowning down. I understand pain, but I know there is richness here. I know that this is an opportunity for really asking yourself, who am I really? Am I really losing someone? Because I'm going to be next. That's the thing. We live life like we are dogs, closing our eyes, pretending it's not happening, right? It is happening with every breath that we take. We are dying, and we are detaching from so many things every single time. But can we pause and acknowledge that in order to be able to see the way out? And the way out is not, okay, that's going to be done. And in a year, in 3 months, in a week, in 20 years, I'm going to be over it. But it's actually an invitation to pause in time and see, oh, okay, what does it mean that this body will no longer be here? What does it mean that my labels of a lawyer, of a doula, of a wife, of a sister, of a son is not who I am? Then if I'm not that, who am I? And that's at the root of my work, of my offering. That can we take in all of these challenges, all of these detachments, to really come to the real question we should all be asking ourselves, that nobody else can answer for us. And then we continue to ask that question constantly, because the mind wants to gives us the perfect answer, so then we're not in the struggle anymore. But it's not a belief, but an inner knowing. And so it's a constant. And that's why in all ancient traditions, they take practices, meaning we take action in order to process our grief. And I love that in English, you have the word mourning. We don't have it in many other languages, right? Like, because mourning are the actions we take to process the pain of grief. The actions that we take. And grieving and mourning dance together. And so we have the pain, we acknowledge it. We know that only through the actions we can move forward. That's why in all tradition, there's always a celebration of life, one way or another one. There is a gathering together. There is nourishing, because usually there is food. My land, there was always been music, right? And sound and resonance. And not only at the time that the detachment from identity is happening, meaning somebody's dying or somebody's going through the end of life as they knew it, but throughout time, in a period of time, there was always that support and always that action that we have to take for it. And so I think a long answer for what you were saying, what do we do when it's happening? Support, yes, but then also action. What are we doing to process that? How are we doing?
So
how are we connecting?
As a death doula, do you work with the entire family, if there is a family, or do you work with the individual? I mean, as in, sort of death can also be very complicated, especially when families are dysfunctional, when there's issues. How do you, as an outsider, how does the death doula manage that space?
It is such a complex time. We make it complicated because when we are faced with mortality, we all enter survival mode. And when we are in survival mode, we take poor choices. So people is like, oh my God, I actually get to know this person. Like they show me their true colors. Not really. Because when we are in the struggle, when we want to numb and avoid and run, when I don't have tools and I don't have the capacity to actually sit with my own mortality, when life is becoming really real, I'm going to run the other way. That's just our human nature. And so I don't have rules on how to work as a doula. I really meet people where they are, and every situation is different. There has been times that I work with, the family. Sometimes I work with one person. Sometimes I work with the person that is dying. Sometimes I never work with the person that is dying, and I work with somebody else that they need the support for that. Other times I work with couples that are getting divorced. Sometimes I work with one of the person. Sometimes it is the stages of life. And so to me, beyond of how does this work, because they're beautiful doulas at many different stages, because it just means that you are there to support with a perspective because you're not emotionally involved in it. But I think the most important thing is to ask yourself, how can I be supported in a moment of transition? Because it's important also to understand that when we are grieving, meaning I'm detaching from something that I knew to be true for me, and I don't know who I am anymore, that involves so many different situations and experiences, my tendency is to isolate myself because I feel nobody understands me. Nobody knows what I'm going through. It's only me. And because we live in duality, yes and no. Yes, I'm never going to be in your skin. Like I said before, like what's the biggest pain? The one you're going through. I don't know it. Like, I don't know the relationship truly of my brothers and my father. And the three of us don't have a father anymore. But our relationship with my father is different. What my father represented for each of us was different. So do I know their pain inside out? No, I don't. But at the same time, we know pain, and that is an experience that can bring us together. We have something in common. And so when we realize that, it's like, oh, I'm going to isolate myself because I'm going to feel like nobody understands me. That is actually the biggest struggle. And that is, it can even be dangerous because we can move from grief into depression. And it is a fine line. Because in that isolation, the sadness, it takes us in, and then we push everybody away. And we are tribal. We need that support. We need one another. So that the work is really to understand that, hey, I see you. Hey, I'm here with you. You're gonna want to pull away when actually this is the time to receive the support, to be in community, to feel that, to find the commonality, so then we don't fall into our ways of harming ourselves and harming others. So in those complex moments, we a lot of times make poor choices. And it's not because that's our true colors, like I said at the beginning. It's because we don't have the capacity to do it any other way. And we're really trying for that to go away.
It's very fascinating. And I hadn't put two and two together in the sense that you can be a death doula dealing with death, but you can also be a grief and death doula dealing with many other deaths that aren't necessarily death of the person, in the sense of if you're going through a divorce, maybe you do need a grief doula that can hold you through the process. As you say, it's a question of change, and it's a question of having somebody hold your center. You know, the vision that I get with it. I don't know if you know Winnie the Pooh, but Winnie the Pooh, he flew off, and there was a string that would attach. I think it was Piglet that was attaching. Piglet was holding on to Winnie the Pooh to keep him grounded, so he wouldn't fly away. So it's kind of, that's what a death doula is. It keeps you grounded so that you don't fly away.
I love that. Yes. Yeah, it truly is. And that's why I have dedicated my life. And at the beginning, many of my dear friends were saying, like, what are you doing? You're studying a million things and you're being pulled in different directions. What are you really doing? And I questioned it. My mind questioned it for so long, but I followed the guidance of my heart and I stayed with it. Okay, like I'm being able to study this and to understand it from this way and to embody this and to do these practices and do all of it. And then I understood my shamans and this wisdom traditions did the same thing. They are masters in humanity and masters in divinity. It was really supportive for me when I was studying to become a grief and end-of-life doula at the University of Vermont. My teacher encouraged me not to dismiss or put aside everything that I was already practicing and that was already embodied. You create a practice in which you really support people because you have said that that's what you really want to do, support them in the challenges of life. So to me, it is a holistic approach to challenges, a holistic approach to the letting go, really coming and seeing us as a whole. And so in my practice, I really do take time to really talk about what does it mean to be in survival mode for our physical bodies? What are you eating? How are you sleeping? Who are you talking to? What are you watching? What are you listening to? And understanding like this is going to be the tendency. And this is what is supported. How much time are you spending with nature? How are you spending time in nature? Really understanding ourselves from every layer of our being. Because when grief comes, that's why they call it a holy experience. It's not just our emotional body, right? And mental and emotional body gets affected, but it's at all levels. Grief brings an incredible amount of stress. And with that, it actually, our vitality struggles and our energy lowers down. So we need to be able to have the support for the physical body, for the mental, emotional body, but also need the support for an energetic body. And we need to get support for our soul and to come in contact with our connection with wisdom. And so to be able to be seen and embraced in all aspects of our lives, I feel is imperative, and we have forgotten. We have forgotten that is all of it. And so that, as you were saying it beautiful, Winnie the Pooh, yeah, it's somebody that can keep you grounded, all the dimensions, because the multidimensional beings that we are, right? Somebody that can hold you into that space. As we navigate life, because it would be wonderful that when my dad died, that was it. That the only thing was happening is just like, okay, let's just mourn my dad. But no, there are bills to pay. There are things to deal with. There are homes to dismantle. There are things to get rid of. There are emotions that are flying. There are poor choices from different people. There are people that are numbing themselves, people that are trying to run away, people that get in touch with their aggression and anger because that's the first emotion they feel. There's people that pull away because sadness is the first emotion they feel. They're right, like there's resistance. There is a complexity in all of our transitions.
Yeah.
And it's important to be reminded of the simplicity of what we're grieving.
I remember reminding a patient of mine, I don't know how it was in the past in Peru or in America, but here many years ago, you would wear a black banner across your arm to say that you were grieving. And you were meant to do that or dress in black for up to 7 years, which is a hell of a long time. But it does take a hell of a long time to really come to terms with it all, with all the complexities and all the different layers and really find your center. So I guess to have somebody holding your rope while you are losing your head, per se, allows you to gather your layers a little bit easier. I'm not sure, but I would have thought so. For me, I wish I would have had a death doula like you. That would have been very, very helpful. I know that there are many different types. There's some that are much more executive, that they come in and they do all the finances and they organize the funeral and help you go through that. Not all of them are necessarily as spiritual as you. In my opinion, I would have loved to have a spiritual guide like you, but I think it's important to mention that there are lots of different types of doulas out there that can support the person through the process. Is that correct?
Yes, and it is, everyone plays a role because it is important and is really good. It actually makes things easier when somebody is transitioning. And I experienced it with my dad. I had the chance to be able to sit down, ask, what do you want? How do you want a funeral? You don't want a funeral. Do you want to be cremated? You don't want to be cremated. Do you want to be buried? Like just even at the fact that I had the privilege to have the conversation with him. There is one more treatment you could do. Do you want to do that treatment? Do you want to go home and begin this process? It doesn't mean that you're giving up and that that you don't love anybody because you're not doing that. So it is so important to have the support at all layers of our existence. Meaning, it is wonderful to have somebody to sit and say, oh my God, I have a big stake and I don't know how to do this and how to decide this. And somebody could do that, right? Like, do you want to sign I do not resuscitate if that is part of a law in your country or where you live? Or to have a conversation. I just had that conversation with my mother. In Peru, there is not a support of, to have something as I do not resuscitate. Like you have a paperwork that said that you don't want that, and she doesn't want that. And so, okay, let's have the conversation about how do you want to manage that if the time comes that you don't want to, and if you're being taken to the emergency room, that's what is going to happen. How do you want to manage that? To be able to have those conversations are so very relevant and important. As much as it is somebody that is in the spiritual realm, they can actually say, "Hey, how is your heart doing? How do you feel?" And so every stage, it's important. And I feel that the relevance is coming into place because we are really struggling with transitions right now as a culture, as a society, because there is not that tribal support.
Yeah. Well, Gaia, is there anything that you wish you would have known or wish you would have been told when your father passed away, or when you've had a sense of transition that you want to share for other people to consider?
I think I will share again what I shared before. We need one another. We're not meant to do it alone. And this is not something that we have to get through, but there is so much richness in it. And our grief and our pain are truly doorways to discover who we are, that true unconditional love. That is really what is happening. Is that happening to us? And I know it can be like a bumper sticker or a quote that we what made cheesy, but it's not happening to us, happening for us to discover who we really are. Because in the moment where we're faced with mortality is the moment that we can actually know who we are, why are we here, have the true experience of.
Beautiful. Really beautiful. Thank you so much for your time and your wise words and your wisdom and your kindness. It's been a very moving conversation. And yeah, I wish you all the best with your endeavors. I have no doubt that you will fly. But thank you. I really appreciate it. And I hope that other people can listen to this and feel the support and look for the support that they need in whatever format.
Thank you. This was such an honor. This is the purpose of my life. So thank you for supporting that. Thank you. So much love.